Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. 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 Rising in the name of the Lord, the great God of the universe, giving honor to all prophets, especially a prophet in these days and times, Noble Drew Ali. Peace. I am your host, Grand Sheik Divine Minister Romeo Joyner L. Welcome to Temple Talk, Episode 4. Read it for yourself. As always, before I start, I'd like to give honor to all of the Moorish Americans, the ones who attend the temple and the ones who have yet to find their way yet. Tonight, as always, I will present some books that you should read to read for yourself. Beginning with one book called Noble Soul by a good Moorish American Muslim, Eric Munjin Bey. The name of the book is called Noble Soul. And the other book that he has is called SO Workbook 1 and SO Workbook 2. We have another brother that I want to give honor to who wrote another book called Cover Your Head. It's by a good brother, Grand Sheik Divine Minister, Brother Cudjoe Adwo L. Welcome again to Temple Talk. Tonight, this topic is going to be a little rough for some and maybe a little tough for others, but it's something that we need to talk about. And that's the ability to read for yourself. One of the things that I do as a Grand Sheik in the Moorish Science of America, when I hold my law and history class, before we even have anybody attend the class, they're required to bring with them their Bible and a dictionary, preferably Webster's dictionary. And the reason why I do that is because most of us growing up in the Christian church, we know that Bible more than we do anything else. As Moorish American Muslims, we have the Holy Quran that they call of Mecca. That's the one that's written either by Yusuf Ali, Malana, one called the Noble Quran, or we have one called we have Malana, Yusuf Ali's translation, and we have the Noble Quran. However, we also have a book called the more scientific book. It's called the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple for the Moorish Americans. Now, going back to the Bible, most of us who read that Bible, we don't do three important things. The first thing that we don't do is we don't pay attention to who's speaking. When you're reading a chapter or verse, know who the speaker is, know who the audience is, and know the message. For example, In the book of Deuteronomy, the books was written for the people who were the Jews. The Bible, the first couple of books of the Bible, the first 5 books, they were written for the Jews. That was their law. They didn't mention Christians until the book of Acts, preferably chapter 10 in the book of Acts. That's when the Christians first appeared, and they were first known as Christians in Antioch. Because before, and once they were called Christians, that was a derogatory term. It wasn't something that was held at high esteem. Going back to the book of Deuteronomy, we want you to look out tonight. Read it for yourself. Check out chapter 14, verse 22 to 24. And if for those who are not familiar with that, it's about tithes. Most Christians pay tithes every Sunday, a tenth of their earnings, religiously every Sunday. When you read the scripture, money's not even mentioned. It says the harvest, the fruits of the harvest, and that's seasonally, annually, once a year, and money's nowhere in there. Read it for yourself. When it comes down to the Moorish Science of America, the Moorish Science of America was founded in 1913, but 1926, some things happened. One of the things took place, it went from being a religious structure to being a corporation with corporate rules. And as a result of that, a lot of things changed. So if you want to do the history on it, read it for yourself. One of the things that leaders should be able to do is whenever they give information, they should encourage their followers or their members to check behind them. Answer questions. In the Moorish Science of America, there's an old saying, out of Sunday school comes the goddess of the nation. For that reason, in Sunday school, in any Moorish American temple, any Moorish Science temple, the Sunday school teacher must confirm himself to the questionnaire, which means that whenever a question is put on the floor for someone to ask a question, that question has to be answered before they move to the next thing. But they encourage the readers and the members to read for themselves. They have a term called exercising your 5 senses. And when it's exercise your 5 senses, they let all those who have the ability to do so, to exercise their 5 senses, to answer questions, to take notes, and to read and to do research. Being able to read is a powerful skill. That was one of the reasons why slaves, or so-called slaves, our people, our forefathers and ancestors who were held in captivity, they were not allowed to read because they know that would enhance their knowledge. It would give them a lot of insight on things that were taking place that weren't right. So learn to encourage your children to read. When your children go to school, they should not be going to school to learn to read and write. They should be going to school to read and write as they learn. Those things ought to be taught to them before they even leave their homes. Teach your children to read and to write before you send them to school, before you send them to early childhood education. Teach them to read and write. What that will do, it will put them in a situation where when they go to school, they can progressively move ahead. Because when they can't read or write and you send them to school to learn to read and write, they are already behind. So we want to be progressive and teach our children to grow rapidly, but at the same time for them to learn to read and write as they're reading and writing as they learn, not going to learn to read and write. So there's a difference. Read it for yourself. When it comes down to prison populations and people called so-called inmates, prior to them being incarcerated, a lot of them cannot read. They cannot read or they don't write well. So that's a skill that they must learn to do while they're inside. And as quiet as they kept, most people who are incarcerated learn to read at a much greater and a much better rate than they did when they were out in society, because they have time and they're there, and that's a skill that they know is important. And then they develop that skill because they want to learn how to present their cases. So when they go into the system, the courts of law, they'll be able to hold their own. Read it for yourself. Another thing I want to touch on is these leaders and these particular leaders in any organization, leaders ought to be able to do a lot of things for you other than just give you lip service. They ought to be able to provide you a better quality of life that you don't have, that you didn't have before you met them. In other words, if they're leaders, they ought to be able to improve your quality of life by providing you with things that you need and things that you didn't have that's going to enhance your quality of life. They ought to be able to improve your chances of survival and make sure that you have the things you need to grow. If they're going to stifle your growth or they're not giving you the things you need and they're just taking money from you, you don't need to follow anybody like that. I don't care what organization you belong to. You have to know one thing, that people who are leaders, they're responsible for the people that they lead. They're not in a position to take from them to become wealthy or rich or to live better than the people that they have following them. Their job is to make sure that people following them have a better quality of life with them before they came to them. That's the whole purpose of being a leader. You ought to be able to improve the quality of life of your people. They can't help you, and there's no structure to where they're providing you a better quality of life. Don't follow them. Don't get caught up into the joke or the game. It's a game. It's a scam. They don't live better than you. They can't offer you something better than what you already have. And they're not living a moral and decent life. Don't follow those people. I want to go back and reflect back on two leaders that I know about who started off okay. But in the end, because people didn't know those who labored among them, they wound up being in some pretty tragic circumstances. The first one was a man by the name of Jim Jones, the Guyana massacre. Started out as a great minister, but in the end, instead of him looking out for his followers, he started out well. He provided things for them that they didn't have, but at the end, he wound up poisoning them and having a lot of them actually unlived. Another one was a man by the name of David Koresh. David Koresh was another pastor who started out okay, and he went over the deep end. Over and over again, we can see examples of so-called leaders who started out on the right path and wind up doing some pretty tragic things, costing a lot of people their lives. Let's go back to some of the things that we see take place in other organizations. Let's look at the history of this country. This history of this country has, as some Oldemore says, the trees or the flag of this country, they called it the land of good and evil. The United States of America, to a lot of people, is a wonderful place, but it has a bad history. A history that involved the trafficking and the mistreatment and the robbery of a lot of people. That's a portion of history that some people want to erase. But there's an old saying, if you don't remember what happened in the past and you try to erase it, you can repeat it. So we want to make sure that we teach our children the proper history of this country. Yes, America is one of the greatest places you can live. The United States of America is a great superpower, but there's a lot of problems, and we know what those problems are. Until we have equality among all people, and our resources are allocated to people based on their need and not on their zip codes, it will continue to be chaotic, and there will continue to be corruption. And yes, Jesus did say the poor would always be with you, but the manner in which people are poor in this country is absurd. Nobody should ever be homeless. Nobody should ever be hungry. This is one of the wasteful nations on the planet, and we need to change that. But all problems and all solutions start in the most important place and the most important unit on the planet, and that's the family. Season your children's minds with the maximum of truth and watch the bent of their inclinations so that no evil thing gains strength with their years. That's right out of the prophet's playbook. We need to learn how to teach our children the values of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Because justice, the society, the peace of society depends on justice. We need to teach those five principles to our children. We have to be models for our children and treat them the proper principles of life in the home. We can't send them to school. Nobody's coming to save us until we start with the foundation of the family and build on that platform. Because what children learn in the home, they're going to take out into the community. And we have to teach them that in the house, as well as society, is built on the concept of reward and consequences. We have to incorporate that with our children and teach that to them from parents to children. We can't wait for a system to teach that to them. So we have to really get those things ordered right away. Start with the children first. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is managing resources for your family. If you're watching the news, you hear rumors of war, like it mentions in a lot of those scriptures, rumors of war, and you hear about wars. Prepare yourself to where you have a supply of food and water to sustain yourself for at least 90 days. You need to do that. That's important. The evil day that we read about and that we hear about in the temples, that evil day is here. A lot of things that are taking place right now are withheld from us, but they're taking place right in front of our very eyes. But we have to take off the blinds and look and see what's going on, and don't get caught up in sports and the entertainment and the rap music and all of the other things that are diversions to prevent you from seeing what's really happening. We have to take off the blinds and pay attention to what's going on. Really prepare yourself. Having a plan for an emergency. So if you have to get family members together, where will you meet? And if you're going to meet, where would you go if you had to leave this state? Where would you go if you had to leave the city of Baltimore? These are things you shouldn't wait to happen. You should be proactive. So when they happen, you're ready. They got an old saying. They say, if you're not ready, get ready. And if you get ready, stay ready. It's here. Watch the news. By all means, be also careful of that, because certain things are put out there as diversions. We see it with a lot of things that are taking place now. And don't get caught up in the diversions. Watch as well as pray, but prepare yourselves, because that evil day is here. How many people are familiar with the on 695, the circle that goes around the city of Baltimore and the neighboring counties? Anybody would think why they have it like that? That's not just a design to get you to travel. Look what's on the perimeters and inside the circle of 695. You have a couple of military installations, Marine Corps bases, 5th Regiment Army. You have the National Guard, the state police. So all the stuff is there. You just have to pay attention. There's a book that they have out called The King Alfred Plan. Familiarize yourself with that. That book is serious. It spells out all of the things. It talks about the evacuation routes. It talks about the military installations, what unit's going to be called up during civil unrest, and rioting and looting. It lets you know where people will be taken and which groups they're going to select. Read it for yourself. Read it for yourself. I also want to mention, too, that with all the things taking place with the SNAP benefits, that's done by design, too, because there's a lot of things taking place to where a lot of goods for services are no longer available. Here in Baltimore City, the collapse under that bridge took out a lot of jobs and prevented a lot of cargo from coming in. And with the relationship that the governor has with the president, that doesn't help a whole lot for us. So we have to prepare for things like that too. Read it for yourself. Do your history on anything that you hear tonight. Check out some of the books that were given to you as references, because there's some information that you need to know, that you should read. Learn to read it for yourself. Learn to read and to write. People do a whole lot of talking and they make a whole lot of statements, but check the references. Look at the speakers. As I mentioned before, when we're talking about the Bible, in that Bible, know who the speaker is, know the audience, and know what the message is. You'd be surprised because those messages were for people that were back centuries, not to this day. So a lot of the things that they talk about today that they use from then, they're distorted. But even their scripture says that do not take away or do not add, right? But they do that. And it's for a reason because it's about money. Tithing. Tithing is about money now. It wasn't about fruits and harvest annually. It's about money weekly. Check out that chapter and verse that I gave you in Deuteronomy. It's very serious because our people don't read as much as they should, but that's one of the most powerful skills you can have. Read it for yourself. If there are any questions that you have that you need to speak with me about and reference anything that you heard tonight on this platform, you can reach me at 443-414-9443 and a temple address. Temple number 7, Rosedale, Maryland. North Central America is 6628. Kenwood Avenue, Rosedale, Maryland, 21237. Notice I didn't give out a post office box. I don't have a restricted number. I'm accessible. A lot of things that I said tonight might have ruffled some feathers, but anybody knows me. If you have a problem with me, come see me. And if you don't want to come see me, name the time and the place. Just don't make me wait. They're not boastful words, not threatening speech, and I don't have a harmful motive, but I'm accessible. I don't walk around with bodyguards. Most of the time I'm by myself. And if you need to speak to me about anything that you're disappointed with about me or that you have a problem with me about, I'm accessible. You can reach me anytime, anywhere. I'm that type of soul and that type of spirit because I stand on what I know and I do what I need to do for the people that I love. I am your host, Romeo Joyner L. Again, I greet you in peace and welcome to Temple Talk. Till the next time, stay well, be safe, and peace.